Everyone, and welcome back to another video. And today's video comes out of the White House, and this is the very first political article that I've read on this channel, so we will see how this goes. But before we get started, if you enjoy the videos on this channel, if you enjoy the commentary on this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. So let's get into the article. Trump's tax returns won't be public anytime soon. Okay, that's not surprising. House Democrats, as expected, have asked the IRS for President Trump's tax returns. It could be months before they see a single page. Representative Richard Neal of Massachusetts, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, sent a letter to the IRS on April 3rd asking for individual and business tax returns Trump filed from 2013 to 2018. Now, I know they sent the letter asking for this. Now, if the IRS is required to give this information, I'm not sure. Neal has the authority to make such a request. Congress passed a statute in 1924 following the Teapot Dome scandal that allowed the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee to obtain anybody's tax return from the Treasury Department, which oversees the IRS. Okay, so we see that he does have the authority to ask for these tax returns. Now, the IRS, they have very strict disclosure laws, so, a regular person could not ask for this. But according to this article, due to a statute that was passed in 1924, the House Ways and Means Committee can make the request. Trump, of course, is the first president to withhold his tax returns since Richard Nixon began the practice of releasing them in 1973. Trump has said he can't release his returns because they are being audited. Plus, Trump said they're very complex. People wouldn't understand them. Okay, because of course he's the smartest one in the room, okay? But anyway, this one little paragraph brings out a few points that I did want to discuss. And I'm glad that it gives the history of when tax returns started being revealed by presidential candidates. And apparently it started with Richard Nixon. So this is not something that presidents are required to do. Okay, this appears to be a voluntary practice. It's just that when Richard Nixon led the way, the future presidents just followed suit. And, I don't think it's a bad idea because it gives the presidential candidate or the president, it gives us more transparency into their lives. You would be surprised what a tax return can tell you about a person, and who doesn't want to have a transparent leader. Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is he's saying that he can't release his returns because they're being audited. All right. I have a lot of experience with dealing with audits, and you are never told that you cannot reveal your tax returns. Why? Because they're your tax returns. You can do whatever you want with your tax returns. Okay. You do not, the IRS is not going to tell you that you cannot show your taxes. Now, the IRS, on the other hand, they cannot show your taxes to the public. They just can't give your tax information unless you have an authorized representative on file, and they may be able to give it to that person. But the IRS can't just show your tax information. But this is your tax information. You can reveal your tax information to whoever you want to reveal it to. Okay. Now, if you're under an audit and then they change your tax return, then I guess it would be up to you to show whoever you need to show the updated results of the tax return because of the audit. The last thing that I wanted to bring out is he talked about how complex his tax returns are, and they probably are complex. So my one concern is that I know that everybody wants to see these tax returns, but I hope and that they're going to bring, that the Democrats are going to bring in someone who is qualified to do an accurate review of the return and translate the results of the returns to them in layman terms that they understand. Okay, unless there is someone that is a Democrat that's going to be on this committee who has a deep knowledge of taxes, So I'm just hoping that they're not just going to go in and try to decipher the information on their own, that they will have someone who is qualified, like CPA, tax attorney, enrolled agent, that can go through these tax returns and, and translate the tax returns to them so that there are no wrong assumptions made about this man's taxes. All right. But audits don't prevent Trump from divulging the information, and many critics think that Trump won't release his returns because they show aggressive tax dodging and maybe worse. Yeah, anytime you have, rich people don't pay a lot of taxes. Some pay taxes, but a lot of them have little loopholes. And, he may not want some things to get out. So that's what I think. I'm curious to know what's on his taxes. We may not know for quite some time. While Neil can ask for the returns, Trump can instruct his Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, to say no. Congress has a legitimate right to ask for the information as part of its oversight role, says Steve Rosenthal of the Nonprofit Tax Center, a tax attorney and former counsel to Congress's Joint Committee on Taxation. What is less clear is whether the president will turn over his returns voluntarily. I think he'll resist. They could construct some executive argument saying that this is a fishing expedition. And like I said, Trump turning over his tax returns, even though every other president since 1973 has been doing it, is totally voluntary. He does not have to turn over the tax return. In a lot of people's eyes, does this make him look a little, sketchy? Yes, it does, that he doesn't want to release them. But at the end of the day, he's really not required to. If Trump does resist, the House would have to go to court to force him to turn over his returns. Lower courts might be likely to side with the White House, but if Trump appealed, the case would land at the Supreme Court, newly refreshed with two Trump appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. The new conservative majority Trump himself helped create will be deciding, says Georgetown law professor Victoria Norse, former chief counsel to Vice President Joe Biden. If I'm his lawyer, I'd say it's a separation of powers issue. Okay, so there's some recourse. If he does not voluntarily give up his tax returns, then they can take it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court could force him to release these tax returns, But, is he going to get the Supreme Court to side with him? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Trump's most recent appointee, Brett Kavanaugh, has an expansive view of presidential power and could side with a Trump request to keep his tax returns private. That might not carry the whole court. But Trump might also use the courts to drag the whole thing out as long as possible. He could try to stall for 2 years, says Norse. Congress might never get the information. The courts can be slow. And that's something that I could see him doing. They want to take it to court. Let them take it to court. We're going to drag it out. You have cases that have been in the Court of Appeals for years. By the time, and if Trump plays the court system how he would like to play it, by the time they release his tax returns, he probably won't even be president anymore by the time the ruling comes down. So either way, I don't think Trump is going to release his tax returns. I know 1 minute he says he is, the next minute he says he's not, but I don't think he's going to do that. And I agree with this article that, he could possibly, use the court system to hold up this whole process, just to stall, even if he does get some type of ruling that he needs to give up the tax returns. And then by that time he won't be president, possibly, and it'll be a moot issue. If the House does eventually get Trump's tax returns, the next question is whether they could legally make them public. which is an unsettled matter that revolves around whether the legitimate legislative reason to make such information public. And that is a good point because the IRS have very strict disclosure laws that they must follow. Now, while the committee may be able to get his tax returns, every a taxpayer is protected by disclosure laws. The IRS cannot give your information or disclose it to the public. You just can't do it. It's not allowed, and it's a very serious issue. They can only disclose your tax information to you yourself or to your or to an authorized person. Okay, and the public, we're not entitled to see it. So I don't know how that committee would be able to make the information public unless they have their own set of rules where they can, make someone's private tax information public. There's some irony here because in 2014, House Republicans made public the tax returns of 51 nonprofit organizations. The Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp had obtained from the IRS using the same statute Neil would use to get Trump's tax return. So Republicans established a precedent for going public, and if Trump's returns didn't find daylight through legal means, it's possible someone would leak them to the press. Okay, so the point about this is two different issues here, okay? A nonprofit's tax return is public information, okay? You can go on a website called GuideStar, and any nonprofit that files a 990 tax return, it's right there. Okay, so nonprofits, public charities, their tax returns are an open book. You have access to that. We're talking about the president being a citizen, an individual taxpayer. Those are not public record. So there, to me, this is two different things. You can't really. This is like comparing apples to oranges. So it's one thing being able to, I can go on GuideStar and pick out 51 nonprofit organizations and print out their whole tax return. Anybody can do it. Okay, so I don't know if they're going to be able to force him to give up his tax returns, and if they do, I don't know if it would be legal to reveal it to the public. So, I'm not a tax attorney, but if we have anyone that's experienced in this area, leave a comment below. If Trump's returns do become public, they wouldn't automatically answer all relevant questions about Trump's finances. If Trump received loans or other types of financing from controversial foreign sources, for instance, it won't be spelled out on his returns, which aren't required to go into that level of detail. It might be a little hard to find some things people would like to see, Rosenthal said. It won't say loan from oligarch on a Schedule B. And that's exactly right. If he's dealing with a lot of loans, the most they probably would see is, he paid some interest, and they would just have to dig deeper. It's like when you're going through an audit and they may want the backstory behind some of those entries, then you would have to dig a little deeper. And then how far are they allowed to go into his personal finances to, as it relates to his tax returns? I don't know if, the committee is allowed to dig that deep. Maybe they are. And that's why I said it's important that they have somebody that is an expert in taxation that can tell them what these tax returns are saying. And so then maybe they would need to dig a little deeper, and then they could ask for more documentation if they are allowed to ask for that documentation. Remember, I'll say it again, him disclosing his tax return information, like it or not, is completely voluntary at this point. He's not required to do it. So if they get the tax returns, I don't know how deep they can dig into it. And if they plan on doing a whole lot of digging, how long is that going to take? So we'll see what happens. But there would be juicy bits all at the same time. At a basic level, ordinary taxpayers would get to learn Trump's effective tax rate, which is most likely a lot lower than it is for ordinary workers. Of course, anytime Amazon, a $1 billion company, didn't pay any taxes, and then you have hardworking people, that work hard every day, and they're paying all these taxes this year, you know, it just doesn't seem fair. But, if you're rich, you get access to more things that you can do. Given the many tax breaks available to real estate developers, it's even possible Trump's tax bill has been zero for some years. The president's return would also indicate whether he might be benefiting financially from his position as president, though income flowing to properties such as his Washington, D.C. hotel. Taxpayers would get to see how much Trump donates to charity, and tax experts would be able to conduct a thorough analysis to determine if Trump's tax strategy skirts the law. Maybe that's what Trump is hoping to avoid. And, that's the opinion of a lot of people, that he's definitely trying to avoid something being found out about his financial affairs. But again, like I said, we'll see if, they'll be successful in getting his tax returns before his presidency ends. uh, because if he does appeal it, he can tie this up in the court system. And, the reality of the situation is they won't get the tax return. So you have a lot of issues going on here. You have whether or not he should be forced to reveal his tax information. You also got to deal with IRS disclosures and if it should be made available to the public. And is he really trying to hide something? I don't know, but we'll see how this turns out, and I'll definitely keep an eye on this story. So if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.